Hi, I'm Jack, and welcome back because today I'm going to give you guys a spoiler-free review for a new release on Disney Plus recently, Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers. It is directed by Akiva Schaffer, one of the members of the band The Lonely Island, and it stars John Mulaney and Andy Samberg as Chip 'n Dale. And with that said, let's get started. The film follows Chip and Dale years after their show got canceled, but when a mysterious disappearance from one of their former castmates occurred, Chip and Dale must put all their differences aside and work together to fix their friendship and save their friend as they uncover a mystery behind the disappearance. I had no expectations for this movie. I never watched the Chip 'n Dale cartoon show growing up. So when I heard about this movie and heard that John Mulaney and Andy Samberg were going to voice the characters, it had my attention, it had my curiosity, but I didn't quite have a certain expectation level for this movie to reach. And it is safe to say that I was blown away by this movie. It is a huge surprise from start to finish. I think the pacing is excellent. It felt so quick without feeling dull or we're needing to slow down or we have too much going on. I was invested in the story that was being told, and I love John Mulaney and Andy Samberg as Chip and Dale. Their dynamic is excellent, and it's so funny, and both of them are so great at comedy, especially Andy Samberg, who I love from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and even John Mulaney from movies like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and etc. And so they had such a great dynamic, and I really bought those two alongside one another, and I really like just the history of these characters and how we follow them from when they were young, when they first met one another, to what's happening now with them in the story. And I think they are just so great. And it really felt like with those two actors, it really felt like they did, in fact, know each other and have a history. And that's so hard feat to pull off with voice acting. I think they did it so well. And I really enjoyed their scenes with each other, especially some of the more heartfelt moments and comedic moments, and the adventurous parts too. And so as just their scenes with everybody else, especially KiKi Layne, who plays one of the live action lead characters in this movie. And I really like just watching these two together. And one of the things I did not expect out of this movie is for it to be very meta in terms of its commentary. It really much pokes fun at animation and just bootlegging and all that stuff. And it really surprised me because that's not what I expected coming into this movie. And it really reminded me of movies like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, especially because you have 2D animation, 3D animation, and live action all into one movie. And recently, the last few years, I didn't feel like we've had an amazing or a great movie in that department over the past few years. Didn't like Tom and Jerry and other movies like that in the past few years, to be exact. But this is one of the best ones we've had in a while. I think just the way it was able to work plays into the story. It made sense for the world that we've witnessed in this movie. And I think it's an absolute blast. I love seeing all these cartoon characters interact with the live action characters and even just 2D and 3D animated characters. It's really great. And there's so many cameos in this movie where I sit there like, how is Disney able to pull this off? It reminds me of an even better version of Space Jam: A New Legacy, where in Space Jam: A New Legacy, the story itself was really weak because it had a good idea, but it was plagued by an overabundance of cameos and IPs that is owned by that particular studio. Here, they could have suffered from that problem, but the story was still fun and engaging, and it never lost sight of its true story, being about Chip and Dale reuniting so that they can find their friend. And everything else felt like an add-on to it while being there for the story so that they can push it forward, and especially with the commentary on just the animation side of things and in the industry. So much fun. And the jokes are so funny. I laughed almost the entire time. There are only a few jokes that didn't land, and it actually does get quite adult, humorous at times. So I think if you're a younger kid, you might be still able to find fun out of this, and it's definitely okay for kids to watch. But there are some moments in here that felt really much for adults, and especially the humor, and it actually really surprised me here. And they did it so well without feeling in your face about it. And thankfully, the meta stuff was done in a way that did not feel too out there or too over the wall. And I think it's very much a well-done aspect of this movie, and I think it worked well, and it had my self laughing throughout the entire movie, just wondering how is Disney able to pull it off. And not only was it just them showing off like cameos of like celebrities that we all know, and even just some animated characters from like say as early as like the Disney Renaissance or something like that, but you also got cameos from people that are from other studios like Warner Brothers, Paramount, Universal, and it really surprised me because I sat there like, how is Disney able to pull this off? And it was just so great. Again, this could have been a misfire, but it worked so well in its favor, and it elevated the story that was being told here, especially with these characters. The story itself is good, even though it can be very predictable. So for me, I sat there like, even though I'm enjoying what's happening, I do feel like I had an idea on where everything was going and a lot of the twists and turns that took place. And I think the treatment of a certain character in this movie, if you know the history of that certain character, you know it. If you know the history of the original voice actor for this Disney character, then it might come off as off-putting because of what happened to that original voice actor after he voiced that character. So obviously, if you know about it, it's going to be kind of distasteful for you. And I think for me, because I knew of the history, it kind of held the movie back a bit. Because while what they did with the character made sense for this story, I didn't think it was quite the ideal way to go, even though the voice actor for that character still did a really great job on his part. But I do feel like if you knew of what happened to that character in the past with Disney, then that side of the movie is probably not going to work as well for you like everything else does. But for me, in a way, it doesn't bother me as much, even though I understood a lot of the things. I'm like, yeah, maybe they could have done a little bit different with that. But for what the story was doing, I think it made sense. But again, knowing how you feel about this character, which I don't want to spoil because it is a certain villain twist, that it can affect your enjoyment of the movie. And if you're a big fan of the Chippendale cartoons, this movie is going to be like heaven for you. There are so many fun nods to the cartoon in this movie, especially with its lead characters and side characters. So if you are somebody that grew up on Chippendale and watching the cartoons, you are going to love this movie a lot, and you're going to have such a fun time watching it. For me, I didn't have as much of a nostalgic hold with this show, but I still really enjoyed this movie as a whole. But I do think if you're a fan of Disney and Chippendale, I think this movie is an absolute must-watch for you. So overall, I had an absolute blast with this movie. It's so much fun. I love the cast from J.K. Simmons and KiKi Layne and Will Arnett, John Mulaney, Andy Samberg, and Seth Rogen, and etc. And I think it's just a really fun movie that is worth your time on Disney+. So in the end, I'm going to give Chippendale Rescue Rangers an A-. I recommend checking it out on Disney+. I think it's worth your time. Kids can go watch this movie, absolutely, but there are going to be some moments in the story that'll feel very much adultish, but still accessible for younger audiences. So I do recommend you go check it out. And guys, those are my thoughts on Chippendale Rescue Ranger. I hope you guys will check it out if you can. Let me know down below in the comment section, what are your thoughts in this movie? Have you seen it? I'd love to hear it down below in the comment section. And stay tuned, I have a review for Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, coming out real soon as I continue my Star Wars movie review series, and hope you guys will stay tuned for that. And don't forget to follow me on social media. My username is down below at the bottom of the screen and in the description below. So please go do that while you're at it, and thank you guys so much for watching, and don't forget to hit that like button and the subscribe button, and stay tuned for more.
This place looks weird. Remember that animation style where everything looked real, but nothing looked right?
Who are you?
Are you talking to us?
Obviously.
But it looks like you're talking to that window.
It actually looks like I'm looking right at you.
Okay.
Look at my eyes, looking right at your eyes.
Yeah.